Welcome back to another exciting episode of Paladin Financial Talk. I am your host this week, Ellie Robison, joined by our always co-host, Tony Shore.
I'm excited. I'm here. I'm
Hi,
ready for the
Tony.
show today.
It's good to see you. I feel like I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it has been a couple of
Yeah.
weeks. Yeah, I did it with, let's see, Jeff Quick, I think was the last person in here, and we
Yep.
had fun. We had a fun show.
Thrive in 25.
You know that, right? And
Yes.
Jeff Foley was mad because Jeff Quick used that for a show title, but Jeff Foley tried to copyright that.
He's the one who keeps plugging it around the office.
He's trying to get that to be a thing,
Yes.
and saying Thrive in 25.
Yes,
Yeah.
which we're getting there.
We're getting there. Yeah, Thrive in 25.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
like it.
Yeah.
He is so funny. That Jeff Foley. So he wanted his next show to be called Thrive in 25. So he was a little miffed that Quick stole his thunder on that one.
It's too funny. Those two personalities just get at each other sometimes.
Yeah, he wasn't really miffed. He was joking around. But this is going to be a good show that you've got lined up for us today, Ellie. We're talking about financial resolutions.
Yes.
And really, for people who aren't into New Year's resolutions or hate all the talk this time of year, like end of last year, beginning of this year in January, about New Year's resolutions. Oh, I don't make those. Nobody keeps those. Really what we're talking about is setting financial goals, right?
Yes. And so I'm just hoping to inspire, a few people out there on setting some resolutions for themselves or just goals in general.
Sure.
So I came up with 6 financial resolutions that you could consider for yourself on just, setting as goals for 2025.
Okay.
Essentially.
But before we get into that, I have to ask you, Ellie, do you set New Year's resolutions each year?
That's a good question, Tony.
Yeah.
I feel like back in the day, I used to do that, and then I'd completely forget what they were by February 1st.
Mm-hmm.
As of more recently, I started shifting my mindset into like a theme that I'd want to tackle on a year-to-year basis.
Oh, that's a great idea.
So I would, think of what do I want to work on this year? I want to work on being more hardworking or whatever that might be. I'm not as prepared this year because I feel like I've just been traveling for the last few weeks and I have not had any time to gather my thoughts on how I want to approach this year. I do have a couple goals for myself in general, though. I don't know if you know this, Tony, but I am tackling my CFP designation. So my certified financial planner.
That's great.
Yes. And classes started a few months ago and we're getting into the investment section. I'm very excited, but it's a lot of work. So
yeah, I know it is. I know people who have gone through that process, as do you.
Yes.
And you work with some of them. And that's great to get your CFP training and license.
Yes.
I mean, you have the knowledge anyway, and you're helping people, but to have that official status and get that certification, it's important, but it's a lot of work and a lot of cramming.
It is pretty prestigious in this industry, I have to say. Like, I have all my licensing under every single realm, whether it's insurance or under the broker dealer or, acting in my fiduciary capacity right now.
Yes.
But that CFP really elevates you as an advisor. And I say, okay, it's time to start tackling this and let's do one last exam. So I have a year of studying, almost maybe over a year of studying just to take one big exam at the end.
It's huge.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. I know a few people who have undertaken that.
So that's, even though I haven't picked out a theme for myself this year, I think it's just getting back into study mode for myself. So maybe that'll end up being my theme, honestly. It's just...
Yeah. I've worked with a lot of financial professionals and most of them don't have that.
No.
Because they get busy doing what they do and they don't want to put in that time. That's a lot of studying and it's a year-long commitment.
And there's even less women advisors that have
the CFP,
I bet, and then even less for advisors under 40. So I'm really hitting the minority here.
You are really, Ellie, that's quite an accomplishment once you achieve that.
Once I pass it, there's still a lot of work to be done.
We're not gonna pop the champagne yet. We'll wait.
Off about 11 months.
We'll see where you're at in 11 months.
Yes, perfect.
We'll check back in with you on the podcast. But I set New Year's resolutions. I've lately gotten into it. I didn't really used to, but my problem is it's not a good look that I've had the same 2 resolutions since the Reagan administration.
Oh, really, Tony?
I believe it was sometime during the Reagan administration where I started every year diet and exercise.
Yeah, the classic.
The classic. And there is an actual day called Quitter's Day. Did you know that?
I have heard this more recently. I didn't
Yeah.
know it was a thing.
So
Yeah.
people who set New Year's resolutions and start them at the beginning of the year, January 1, the second Friday of the month is called Quitter's Day, because that's when most people stop going to the gym every morning before work.
Mhm.
They say, I'm going to go to the gym, or 3 days a week
Yep.
before work. And then it's 2, then it's 1, and they've stopped. Well, studies show that it only lasts 2 weeks for a lot of
Which
people.
is crazy. And it's kind of sad, honestly.
So this year it was January 10th, Quitter's Day. It's kind of a negative holiday.
Which we're past that. It's
yeah,
the 14th,
we're past.
So
we made it past that. I'm still holding to my New Year's resolutions. Yeah. I'm not drinking alcohol. I am exercising a couple of times a week. Yeah. I'm eating better. So I'm glad I made it at least past Quitter's Day.
So proud of you, Tony. You just got to keep going. I'll hold you accountable next time we chat.
Yes, that accountability is what it takes.
It's huge.
Even for these financial resolutions we're going to talk about.
Absolutely.
So, Ellie, tell us about the first financial goal or resolution that people should have for this coming year.
I wanted to start with managing debt. I think it's something that we just preach on all the time, and so I won't dive too much into it, but just being mindful of minimizing your purchases on depreciating assets mostly. I think we all know that cars are probably one of the most expensive depreciating asset out there. So just be mindful of where you're putting your money in that sense. Also monitor your credit utilization ratio. You want to keep that below 30% just to keep a good credit, which is more important for younger people. I guess once you're in your retirement ages, you might not be looking to shop around for huge mortgage loans and buying new houses at that point, but it is important for everyone in general, just keeping a good credit score. But leaning into, we're going to call this big brain. Okay. So I learned this from Zach. We say big brain around the office when we're bringing in bigger concepts.
Wait, stop right there. First of all, I know Zach in your office. You learned something from him?
He's very Gen Z.
Let me write this down.
He says
this
big brain.
Date, no,
yes,
I'm kidding.
I know.
I'm teasing Zach.
I think it's also a good thing to consider leveraging your debt too, because you do hear a lot that you don't want to carry any debt, but not all debt is bad. So big brain on is, if you are carrying a lower interest rate on your mortgage, maybe it's going to be in your best interest to be putting your excess cash flow into something that might be yielding you a higher return over time instead of paying off that debt. So it's like what we like to call is good debt. This could also be,
there's good debt and bad debt.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we want to just make sure that we're paying off the high interest debt, the credit cards.
Right.
If you did lock in a high interest rate on a car loan, start working on that. But just being mindful of your debt ratio essentially is number one on the list.
I mean, if you have a home and you have a mortgage like my wife and I do, and it's less than 3% or less, why not use the bank's money? Yes. Why pay that? Use our money that we want to make, compounding interest on in our investments or for our retirement. Why would we take that money and pay off our house when we can just use the bank's money at almost no cost?
Exactly.
I mean, relatively small.
Exactly. Anyway. You can still get CD rates today at 4.5%. Rates have dropped a little bit.
Yeah.
But so that's what we call big brain, because it's not a blanket recommendation. There's going to be some people who don't fit that.
Yeah, everybody's situation is different.
But it's something to consider. So
there you go.
wanted to bring that to our attention.
That's good. Big brain. I like that.
Big brain.
Yeah.
Number 2 on the resolutions list is optimizing your portfolio, which ideally should be led by your advisor. They're going to help give you those recommendations, but I think it's important for you to be in the know of what we're talking about. I do see it very frequently. I'll be sitting in a meeting and people's eyes glaze over. That's okay. I'm not offended by it, but I do think it's important for you to just know why we might be recommending something versus not something else. Your investment mix is a fit to your risk tolerance and your age or your time horizon, essentially, and your asset level. So your situation changes over time. Just because we might give you a recommendation in your early 30s, that's not going to carry through for the rest of your life, right? Things change, and as you grow your investable assets, there's might be opportunities to diversify into alternative investments that might include real estate, private equity, commodities. And so there might be a threshold there where we're like, okay, it's time to start shifting our gears and considering this for growth potential. Or vice versa, you might be getting closer to retirement. It's you want to start protecting principal. Maybe we need to incorporate an annuity into your investment mix. And so that's what I want people to, be aware of. There's a whole world out there of what we can consider. It's not so cut and dry. And so when we are talking through options, keeping your mind open on saying or on understanding why we might be recommending something.
Yeah, I think that's great. So manage your debt was the first resolution we should have for this year, and optimizing our portfolio. That's
Correct.
something else, another financial goal for the year.
Yes.
Okay.
Number 3, which I think is also good for everyone, including myself, is just becoming more tax literate. We usually lean on our CPAs and our enrolled agents to just like do all things taxes for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I can be guilty of that too. Sometimes I just call my CPA and I'm like, hey, just do this for me. And I don't understand the ins and outs of my own tax situation.
Right.
It's easy to just like, push
Yeah,
it off to someone else.
sure.
As an advisor, what we're looking at is more tax planning in your retirement, but it's important to know tax filing too.
Sure.
Um, in my world, we are paying attention to tax diversification. So, how much you have in non qualified assets, in qualified assets, and Roth assets, essentially, and making sure that we have a good mix between the three. Again, not a blanket recommendation, just usually a rule of thumb for most clientele.
Sure.
With non qualified assets, it's usually one of the last buckets that we really start preaching for a lot of our clients. But it is important because it is a huge tax advantage for your retirement. With non-qualified, I call them brokerage accounts. So that's going to be my slang, is my brokerage account. You can optimize tax loss harvesting in brokerage accounts, which can help minimize taxes in your current year, or you can
So
carry
write
over.
off any losses you have in
Correct.
those funds or investments is what you're
Correct.
talking about. Tax loss harvesting.
Correct. And
Okay.
if you have a big enough loss, you can carry over those assets into future tax years, which a
Okay.
lot of people don't realize. So that helps offset your taxable income in future years.
Wow, I forgot that one myself. That's
Yes.
true. Yeah,
So
that's why we have you,
correct.
Ellie.
So it's a good
Yeah.
reminder for a lot of people. And along with that, in that same vein, is just the capital gains exemptions. If you are under a certain income threshold, whether you're a single filer, married filing joint, or head of household, there's certain income limits where you might have a taxable gain of 0% in your brokerage accounts. So that is huge. And
Yeah.
we like to lean into that in your retirement years,
Sure.
especially if you have fluctuating years where you might be spending more money versus less money. And I usually like helping my clients plan for huge like travel plans. And they say, hey, Ellie, I want to take a very nice fancy vacation in retirement and we want to do it in a couple years. How should we optimize this? I'm like, okay, a 2-year time horizon. Let's see if we can start playing around with your non-broker or your brokerage accounts, your non-qualified assets, and see if we can lock in some 0% capital gains.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that sounds great.
Mhm.
And you can get pretty deep in the weeds anytime taxes come up, but they always play a part in all your financial decisions,
Correct.
especially for investments, for retirement planning.
Correct.
So that's huge. So protect your or make sure your taxes are taken care of, right?
Yes, and I do have another thought here just in becoming more tax literate for yourself is we are in a major Twin Cities metro area with Fortune 500 companies.
Yep.
Um, we have a lot of clients who have a lot of, employer stock options offered through these big companies,
Yep.
and they're all taxed differently. You can have restricted stock units, you can have your employee stock ownership plans, you can have your employee stock purchase plans. All of these kind of stock ownership of the company that you work for are taxed differently. And so I do think it's important, if you are an employee of one of these bigger companies, to have a general idea of how all of this can be taxed in your overall retirement portfolio. It's something we review every single year with our clients anyway, but I think it's good for them to know too,
Yes.
just in general.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So ask questions and just be in the know of what you own essentially.
Right.
Number 4 here is protecting your estate. So, Tony, I don't know if you know of this, but Paladin, we just launched Paladin Legal Services.
Yes, I
Yes.
do. I heard about that.
Okay.
That's
As of
awesome.
a couple months ago, and we've always, preached to all of our clients that we want to make sure that your estate plan is, ready to go and in order. And so what we usually want to review is making sure that you have your primary beneficiaries listed, your contingent beneficiaries listed, making sure that if you need to update your will, like let's get that done for you. A lot of people come through our doors saying that they already have a trust in place. They got it done 15 years ago. And then we help clean up and cross some T's and dot some I's and
Yeah.
figuring out their trust isn't funded. So how can we get that done for you? Sometimes attorneys will help you with that. Sometimes they won't. So we want to make sure that we carry through on all of these estate planning duties to make sure everything is cleaned up to what you want essentially in your estate. So I think that is huge, and we will forever beat that drum because it is just a huge component to your retirement plan.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And obviously, estate planning, legacy planning, you don't want to leave your family in a bad situation or your loved ones or what have you. So have those ducks in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
make sure,
important.
and to top it all off is make sure that your loved ones know where your estate planning documents are or any other important documents.
Right.
So it's something that we help our clients with, and making sure we have digital copies and then making sure they're in a fireproof safe at home somewhere.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife and I, I'm ashamed to admit it took us too long to get to that point, but we finally done all that.
Mhm.
Right. And it was really Jeff Foley was the first one to say, you guys got to do this.
Yeah.
And he really encouraged us. We had a will, of course, because
Mhm.
we had children and we had a living will, if something should happen to us, the kids. But we didn't have anything beyond that, and it was old,
Yeah.
I mean,
Things change over time.
yeah.
Kids grow up, kids get married, then there's grandkids into the picture, which
Yeah, I
you
mean,
might get
people,
there soon.
if you have a big family or you or your kids get married and divorced, you've got to change beneficiary designation.
Correct.
So it really, and there's so much stuff to know per stirpes and per capita, all that stuff.
Yep.
And so I'm glad that Paladin has the legal department, and they've always worked alongside great estate planning attorneys like Matt. My wife and I worked with. So.
Yeah, we want to make sure that we can help support in every area possible. So estate planning, I think, is huge. And I think a lot of people out there should consider that as one of their number one resolutions this year.
Yes. Yeah.
Number 5 on my list here is investing in personal development and your well-being in general. I think a lot of people forget to just put money to yourself and educate yourself in courses or certifications, coaching to help expand your career opportunities.
That's
And maybe
what you're doing.
Maybe that's because that's exactly what I'm doing right now. But reminder for you there, or just considering negotiating higher salaries or better benefits at your employer or the next employer that you might be interviewing at, and really advocate for yourself, because you can never invest too much money into yourself. So I wanted to point that out. And reminder,
I'm sure you did, in hoping that Jeff and Nikki are listening.
they're listening.
Are you asking for a raise on the podcast?
No, I would never
Ellie?
do that.
Oh
Tony.
my goodness! Oh man!
In the financial well-being of this whole conversation, though, I wanted to say schedule your annual reviews with your financial advisors. Okay, so
yes,
put that on your list.
That's
so
huge.
We can help evaluate any goal changes, any financial concerns that have changed, just identifying your progress and just seeing what else we can do to help shape up your future. So think of that as a financial well-being task for everyone out there if you haven't scheduled your annual review yet with your advisor, making sure it's on the calendar.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I think one of the items, I don't know if it is on here, I don't think it is, but we should add another one, and that's work with a financial professional. If you're not already, make that a goal. If you are, or you haven't gotten a second opinion on where you're at and what you're doing, get a second opinion.
Yeah.
Just pick up the phone, give Paladin a call.
Good reminder, Tony. Yeah. I forget not everyone has an advisor.
Right. But because your clients do.
Correct. And that's who I'm mostly thinking about is my own clients.
Yeah. But our listeners who could become clients of you or someone, they should at least be working with some financial advisor.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's so much for us to be in the know about.
Yeah.
There's a reason why we have full-time jobs.
That's right. So what's the number 6?
Number 6 is a little softer, but I do think it's important is to celebrate the little wins that you might have throughout your year,
Make that a goal. Celebrate wins.
Whether
Yeah.
it's a promotion or if it's just a small raise, who cares? That is a huge win for you, and you should go celebrate with your loved ones. It doesn't
That's
have to be
awesome.
very expensive, but
Yeah.
just acknowledge it. I do think it's important, and even though it's a little bit softer of a resolution here, I
Sure.
think people forget that you should be, celebrating with your loved ones.
Yeah, you should.
So
I think that's a good one and a great note to end it on.
yeah.
But those are some great financial goals to have for this year. And I hope our listeners out there take those to heart. And each one was very important. So we should all be doing these things. I think that's great, Ellie. You put together a great list of things and a lot of great comments. So for those out there who want to get that second opinion on where they're at, or have questions about these goals, or questions about where they're at, or maybe they're not working at all with a financial advisor who's looking at the big picture, and Paladin has all of that they can look at. How can they get a hold of you and set up a consultation?
Well, here's a couple things is to help expand your education on some of the things that I have, highlighted today is we have panned out our marketing calendar for 2025. So this is for both clients and non-clients. So the next educational piece that we'll have is a webinar on February 5th. Jeff Foley will be leading that one. Our webinars are usually scheduled for noon. You can register for that webinar straight on our website. So if you go to paladinfinancial.com, we have a education and events page for this upcoming webinar. Jeff should be talking about annuities and then probably a market outlook and just some feedback on, there was a lot of volatility lately. It was a good year last year. Who knows what's going to happen this year? People like hearing about the stock market. And so Jeff will help educate a little bit on both of those things. And that's opened up for anyone, right? So anyone can sign up for our webinars. Next on our calendar in person, we have a educational event for clients on March 10th. And this is to learn more about your tax return and probably slip in, some last minute reminders before you file for 2024. There are some deadlines that you can maximize for your 2024 return up until the tax deadline in, April 15th, I believe it is, 2025. So that will be a last minute reminder and it'll help get you ahead for your 2025 year too as well, and making sure that you are on top of your taxes there. So that is usually an exclusive event for clients, but any of our clients who are listening to the podcast, if you have a friend or a family member that, would benefit from that, please let us know and we'd be happy to tack them on as your guest. So I wanted to point that out. In general, for anyone who is new to Paladin Financial, we do offer complimentary consultations here in the office. I'm an advisor, Matt Bryant's an advisor, Jeff Foley, Jeff Quick. You can give us a call, 651-842-8406 to get it scheduled with one of us and hear more about your current financial plan and how we can help you essentially.
Awesome. That's great. Give that phone number one more time if somebody wants to set up that consultation.
Absolutely. So 651-842-8406. Again, we can do appointments in office, or if you're not in the Twin City area, we do Zoom appointments and we do have clients all over the country. So
that's excellent. Well, thanks, Ellie. Great show today. And listeners, that does it for today's episode of Paladin Financial Talk.